My name is Margaret, and there are some kinds of love that don't get enough attention. People talk about romantic love, family love, the love between parents and children. But there is another kind of love that can hold you together when everything else feels too heavy. It is the love of a lifelong friend, the kind that doesn't need to be explained because it has already proven itself for decades. I didn't truly understand that until the day my best friend of 50 years held my hand in silence. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning that feels like the world is still half asleep. I sat in my usual chair near the window with a cup of tea cooling in my hands. The light was soft, pale gold, and the room felt calm. But inside me, something felt unsettled. Not loud sadness, not sharp grief, something quieter, a tiredness in my heart that I couldn't push away with routine. At my age, you learn to carry feelings in a controlled way. You learn how to smile at the grocery store, even when your chest feels heavy. You learn how to say, "I'm fine," in a voice that sounds believable. You learn how to live with certain kinds of ache without letting them take over the day. But that morning, I couldn't pretend as easily. I had been thinking about time, how it moves forward whether you want it to or not, how it takes people, changes places, rearranges life until what felt permanent becomes memory. I had been thinking about the years behind me and the years ahead of me, the ones that now felt fewer. There are moments when you suddenly realize that the world is beginning to see you as someone who is almost done. Not in a cruel way, in a quiet way. People speak to you differently. They ask if you're managing. They check if you're eating properly. They say things like, "Take it easy," and "Don't overdo it." They mean well, but the message underneath can feel like this: "We are preparing for the day you are no longer here." I looked at my hands resting on my lap, the skin thinner now, the veins more visible, a small tremble when I was tired. These hands had done so much, carried babies, cooked meals, held my husband's hand through fear, wiped tears I didn't show anyone. And still, even after all they had done, they now looked like a reminder of time passing. I took a deep breath and tried to focus on small things, the tea, the sunlight, the ticking clock, but my mind kept wandering back to the feeling that had been following me lately, a kind of emotional loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one at all. I have family. I have children and grandchildren who love me, but family life is busy. Their love is real, but it lives inside schedules. Their calls are often short. Their visits are often rushed. They carry their own responsibilities, and I understand that. I truly do. But some days I don't need a quick check-in. Some days I need to be held. I was sitting there in that quiet thought when my phone rang. The sound startled me because the room had been so still. I looked down and saw her name on the screen, my best friend. For a moment, I didn't move. Seeing her name made something soften inside me immediately. It was like hearing a familiar song from childhood, a reminder of who you were before life became heavy. I answered. "Hello?" I said, and my voice came out softer than I expected. There was a brief pause, then her voice filled the line, warm, familiar, steady. "Margaret," she said, as if my name itself was important. "I've been thinking about you." I swallowed. "That's sweet," I replied. "I'm all right." She didn't respond with good or okay. She responded with quiet knowing. "Are you, though?" she asked gently. That one question made my eyes sting. because she wasn't asking like someone checking off a responsibility. She was asking like someone who knew my voice for 50 years, someone who could hear the truth hidden between my words. I tried to laugh it off. "I'm just tired," I said. She remained quiet for a second, then said softly, "I'm coming over." I blinked. "You don't have to," I began. "I want to," she interrupted kindly, not forceful, firm in the way only true friends can be. "I'll bring some biscuits. Put the kettle on." And before I could argue, she ended the call. I stared at the phone in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not because the day suddenly became exciting, but because I didn't have to carry myself alone for a few hours. I moved slowly through the kitchen, boiling water, preparing cups, setting out a small plate. My home felt different already, as if it was waking up, as if it knew someone important was coming. I glanced at old photos on the shelf and thought about how long our friendship had lasted, through marriages, children, arguments, jobs, grief and change, through time itself. When the knock came, it was gentle. I opened the door, and there she was, older now, like me, gray hair, softer face, but the same eyes, the same quiet strength, the same familiarity that made my chest loosen in the best way. We didn't hug dramatically. We didn't need to. She stepped inside, took off her coat, and looked around like she belonged, because in a way she always had. She smiled at me and said softly, "There you are." And in those 3 words, I felt seen. And in those 3 words, I felt seen in a way that family love doesn't always manage to do. Family love is powerful, but it often comes with motion, errands, responsibilities, deadlines, noise. Friendship love, especially the kind that has lasted half a century, comes with something else. Stillness. My best friend stepped into my living room and didn't rush to fill the silence. She didn't ask 10 questions at once. She didn't say, "I only have a minute." She simply sat down on the couch as if she had all the time in the world, and she patted the seat beside her. I sat down slowly, and she looked at me closely, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that felt like careful attention. She had always looked at me like that, like she was making sure the real Margaret was still there beneath whatever life had piled on top. "You look tired," she said softly. I wanted to deny it, like I always do. I wanted to smile and say, "Oh, I'm fine." But the truth was sitting too close to the surface now. And when you are with someone who has loved you for 50 years, pretending feels pointless. So I nodded. She didn't say why right away. She poured tea for both of us first, the way she always used to do when we were young and sitting in each other's kitchens. She placed the cup in my hands like it was something sacred and warm. Then she sat back and waited. There are people who make you feel pressured to speak, and there are people who make you feel safe enough to speak. She was the second kind. For a while, we simply sipped tea. The room was quiet, but it was not uncomfortable. It was full of years, full of memories, full of unspoken understanding. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, the soft rustle of her coat as she adjusted her sleeve. I could smell the biscuits she brought, warm and sweet. And then, without planning to, I felt my eyes fill with tears again. My friend noticed immediately. She didn't gasp, she didn't panic, she didn't say, "Oh no." She just turned slightly toward me and waited, letting my emotion have room. I whispered, "I don't know why I'm crying." She nodded slowly. "Yes, you do," she said gently. "You've just been holding it too long." That sentence opened something in me. The tears came more freely, not dramatic, not loud, just honest. I pressed my lips together, embarrassed even though I knew I didn't need to be. I feel forgotten sometimes, I admitted quietly, staring at the tea so I didn't have to meet her eyes. Not by my children. They love me, I know they do, but life is busy, and I don't want to be a burden, so I keep everything inside. My friend listened, and when I finally looked at her, I saw moisture in her eyes, too. She reached out and touched my wrist lightly. "You are not a burden," she said firmly. "Not to them, not to me, not to anyone who truly loves you." Her voice was steady, loving, but strong. I swallowed hard. "It's just, some days feel so quiet," I confessed quietly, "and I start thinking about how much has changed. I start thinking about the people who are gone, and then I look around and I feel like I'm surviving, but I'm not truly living." The word surprised me. I hadn't even admitted that to myself. My friend didn't interrupt. She didn't offer quick solutions. She simply sat with my truth, the way you sit beside someone in the rain without trying to stop the weather. When I finished, she took my hand. At first, I thought she meant it as comfort, just a brief squeeze, but she didn't let go. Her hand wrapped around mine and stayed there, warm and steady. Her skin was wrinkled, too, her fingers slightly stiff from age, but the grip was certain. It was the kind of grip that says, "I'm here and I'm not leaving." And then she said nothing. No speech, no advice, no "you should," no "you must," just silence. At first, I thought she was waiting for me to say more, but then I realized she wasn't waiting at all. She was simply being with me. She held my hand in silence as if words would be too small for what I was feeling. And in that silence, something inside me softened. The world is loud. Even when you live alone, the world is loud in your mind. Worries, memories, future fears, unfinished thoughts. But sitting beside her, with her hand holding mine, the noise quieted. It was as if her presence gave my heart permission to rest. I stared at our hands for a moment. 2 old hands, 2 lives, 2 women who had made it through decades of change. We had once been young girls with dreams and bright laughter. We had once been young mothers, exhausted and determined. We had once been middle-aged women juggling responsibilities and trying to hold ourselves together. And now here we are, elderly, silver-haired, quiet. Still connected, still holding each other up. Finally, after a long while, my friend spoke softly. "You know," she said, "I've been feeling similar things too." I looked at her, surprised. She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes I sit in my kitchen and I hear the refrigerator hum, and I realize it's been hours since I spoke out loud, and I think, is this what the rest of life looks like?" Her honesty made me feel less alone immediately. "I didn't know you felt that," I whispered. She smiled faintly. "We don't talk about these things enough. We pretend we're fine because we think we should be. Grateful, and we are grateful. But grateful people can still feel lonely." That sentence felt like permission. We continued sitting there, tea cooling, hands still held, and suddenly I understood something important about friendship. True friendship doesn't always come with entertainment. It comes with companionship. It comes with the quiet courage to sit beside someone's pain without making it about yourself. My friend's silence was not emptiness, it was support. And I realized that sometimes the deepest love doesn't speak, it simply stays. And when something stays, you begin to remember who you are beneath the tiredness. My best friend's hand remained wrapped around mine, and it felt like an anchor. Not heavy, steady. I didn't realize how much I needed that kind of steadiness until it arrived. There are moments in life when you don't need advice. You don't need solutions. You need proof that you are not alone in your humanity. We sat like that for a long time. Outside, the day moved forward. The light shifted slowly across the floor. The tea grew cooler. The biscuits sat untouched on the plate, but the room felt warmer than it had when she first walked in, because warmth doesn't only come from heaters and blankets. Warmth comes from being understood. After a while, my friend finally let go of my hand, not because she wanted to pull away, but because she knew I was steadier now. She leaned back on the couch and said softly, "Do you remember the first day we met?" I smiled through the last of my tears. "Of course," I said. "You borrowed my pencil and never gave it back." She laughed quietly, a small laugh, but familiar. "I did," she admitted, "and you still became my best friend anyway." That laughter opened something in me that had been closed for too long. It reminded me of the younger versions of us, the girls who hadn't yet learned how complicated life could be, who still believed the future was endless. We talked about those early years, how we used to walk home together, how we used to share secrets like they were treasure, how we used to dream about love and adulthood without knowing what it would really demand from us. Then the conversation moved gently into the middle years, marriage, children, the exhaustion of motherhood. We remembered how we used to call each other late at night, whispering so we wouldn't wake the babies. We remembered the times we felt like we were failing and how the other one would say, "You're doing better than you think." Friendship, I realized, is often the first place you learn compassion, because a friend sees you without needing you to be perfect. At some point, my friend stood up and walked slowly around my living room, looking at the photographs on the wall. She paused in front of a picture of my husband and me and touched the frame gently. "He loved you so well," she whispered. I nodded, my heart tightening softly but not painfully. I said, "He did." She turned back toward me. "And you loved him well, too," she added. "I saw it. I always saw it." That sentence meant more than she knew, because sometimes in old age you start questioning yourself. You start wondering if you did enough, if you loved enough, if you were kind enough, if you made the right choices. The past becomes a place you revisit often, and it can be both comfort and regret. Her words quieted my doubts. She returned to the couch and sat beside me again. This time she placed an arm around my shoulders in the way sisters do, not dramatic, natural, familiar. We spoke about our children and grandchildren. We laughed softly about how different generations are, how quickly the young move, how easily they adapt to new things, how often they forget what it was like to be tired. We didn't speak with bitterness, just with gentle acceptance. And then, as the afternoon began to fade toward evening, my friend said something that stayed with me. "Margaret," she said quietly, "we're still here." I looked at her. She continued, "We've lost people. We've survived hard years. We've watched life change faster than we expected. But we're still here. That matters." I felt that sentence settle in me like a warm stone, heavy but comforting. "We're still here," I repeated softly. "Yes," she said, "and as long as we're still here, we can still love, we can still laugh, we can still make someone else's day easier, we can still be important." That word, important, made my eyes sting again, because I had been afraid of becoming irrelevant. But my friend reminded me that importance doesn't always mean being busy. Sometimes it means being present. Sometimes it means being available. Sometimes it means being the person who sits beside someone else's pain and makes it less frightening. As the evening light turned golden, my friend eventually stood to leave. She didn't rush. She didn't apologize for staying. She simply gathered her coat, adjusted her scarf, and looked at me with tenderness. She said, "I'll come again soon." I nodded. "Please do," I whispered. At the door, she hugged me carefully, the way older bodies do, gently, thoughtfully. Then she held my shoulders and looked into my eyes. "And Margaret," she said, "next time you feel that heaviness, call me. Don't sit alone with it." I promised her I would. After she left, I closed the door and stood there in the quiet hallway. The home became still again, but the stillness was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. The silence felt like a soft blanket rather than an empty room. I walked back to the living room and sat in my chair by the window. The sky outside was calm, evening settling slowly. I held my warm cup again, though it had been refilled, and I looked at the street lights glowing softly. And I thought about the power of friendship. 50 years is a long time, longer than some marriages, longer than many lifetimes of routine. And yet real friendship endures because it is built on something simple: being there, not only when life is exciting, but when life is quiet, not only when words are easy, but when pain has no language. That day, my best friend didn't fix me. She didn't try to change my life. She simply held my hand in silence. And that silence reminded me that I was still loved, still understood, still connected. If you are listening to my story right now, I want you to remember this. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not advice, not money, not solutions. It is your presence. It is your steady hand. It is your willingness to sit in silence and say without words, "I don't have to carry this alone." That night, as I watched the last light fade from the sky, I felt a gentle smile appear on my face. Because friendship like that doesn't end, it becomes part of you.